Okay, so it's 12 o'clock and we'll start. I will be recording this session just so that you're aware. But if you're not happy having your kind of face on camera, please feel free to turn your cameras off. So thank you all for coming and taking some time out. I'll just share my screen so that you can see my PowerPoint. As while it loads up. Can somebody just confirm that they can see what a PowerPoint?
Yep, see everything.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. So I'm Sally Smith. I am one of the perinatal and infant mental health clinical leads across 0 to 19 team. I work alongside Jane Fisher. We lead the parent and infant relationship team. So we're a new team that started as part of Start for Life in January. So as part of our offer across our partners, we are doing kind of monthly lunchtime learning slots, just 30 minutes, a little bit of bite-sized training. There will be, please stick your hand up or shout out if you do want any questions answering, but there'll be some time at the end if you have got any questions as well. So this is the third parent and infant relationship lunchtime learning session that we've done. And today I'm just going to talk with you briefly around how a parent and infant relationship difficulty might present in practice. I suppose I'll go off saying that, you know, there's a lot of different ways that there may be a pair problem in practice, but what I'm going to highlight today are the main ones that you will probably see and what we get the majority of referrals for within the service as we've been running it since January. Okay, so outcomes for today. We're going to look at why infant mental health matters and what infant mental health actually means. I hope that you're going to gain a broad awareness of the common causes of attachment difficulties or problems bonding with baby. Recognise risk factors and warning signs. We'll take a closer look at some of the most common difficulties and how they are likely to present, and then we'll consider the impact and risk. Hopefully that should kind of hit everything that we're hoping for today. So infant mental health, why does it matter so much? What does infant mental health mean? So what we know is that across that 1001 critical days from the moment of conception to around 2 years, that babies' brains grow at an exceptional rate. They grow by creating connections between the cells. These are called between the neurons. Neurons are the cells and the synapses are the connections that form between them. Now, connections that aren't needed are often lost by synaptic pruning. So basically what happens in that 2-year window is that loads and loads and loads of brain development happens. And then the brain decides, well, are we using that pathway? Are we not using that pathway? And what it does, it's very clever. It takes away anything that we're not using. So that's why we talk about that being a critical window. When those pathways are pruned away by the brain, they really cannot reconnect in the same way and to the same capacity than what they could do in that from birth to 2 years. So it's so important that we get everything right at the start. Don't get me wrong, it's not kind of like a no-hope cause if we don't get things right by 2 years. But what we do know is that if we're going into the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th year, or even teenage years and adulthood, what happens basically is that it takes a lot longer and it is a lot harder. So really prevention is better than cure. It's a lot kinder than cure, and unfortunately it's a lot cheaper than cure. And I know that that does often come up in a lot of what we talk about with parent and infant relationship work. We know that around in the first 2 years, about 1 million brain connections are being formed every single second, and that is at its heightened phase in those first 1001 days. So experiences that are repeated and are relied upon and are kind of become predictable for babies, they lead to pathways being hardwired into the brain. And in that 2-year window, that's the soft wiring that takes place. Over and above the 2-year window, that's when things get laid down and really kind of like set in stone. What we do know in this rapid time of growth is that the child's relationship with their parents and caregivers are incredibly important. We know that what happens during this time lays the foundations for future well-being and development. You know, we often say that, you know, the relationships that children experience the world through the relationships they form with others. And really that's what infant mental health means. What children need and desire and require to live and thrive is for them to feel emotionally secure and safe and connected to others. They will feel safe and secure and loved and bonded by feeling connected to other people. And ideally, it will be the ones that would be their main caregivers. What we do know, unfortunately, is that persistent difficulties in early relationships can have pervasive effects on many aspects of child development, both physically and emotionally. And we see it socially as well, don't we? In schools, we see it in children in nursery and groups, and being able to socialise and integrate and to be able to understand how to relate to other people as they grow. So what are the causes? So I've written the most obvious ones that we get a lot of referrals for in bold, and those are the ones that I'm going to talk a little bit more about today. But please feel free, if you do want more information on any of the other causes, please come back to us in Pair Team. There's loads of additional training as well that I can kind of signpost you into if you've got a real exceptional interest. Perinatal mental health. What we do know is that having a parent that has got mental health problems, that are struggling with their mental health and having difficulty to manage their own emotions, are likely to find it really difficult to be emotionally available for their children. I suppose what we need to think about is, what does that picture look like for a child who doesn't have a responsive parent? If we think about a woman who is suffering, or a man suffering with anxiety and depression, for instance, how much headspace will that person have for interacting with, kind of playing with, spending time with, smiling, responding, singing, dancing with baby? It's very hard in those moments often for parents to meet the basics. How will kind of like baby's additional needs be met and maintained in those moments? I suppose that's something to be thinking about when we're thinking about the impact of parental mental health. I suppose what we really need to consider here is kind of how a parent's reaction can affect the emotional development of baby, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next few slides. We know that adverse childhood experiences for parents are highly likely to cause them problems as they grow and develop and become parents of their own. You know, we can't be what we can't see. Child death or child removal. Now, having lost a child or having a child removed is highly likely to be a trigger to having difficulties with their own emotional health, but also the parent-infant relationship and continuing those relationships, or dealing with the bereavement of the loss of a child. Domestic abuse. So domestic abuse, we know, has multifaceted fallout for all people involved, that being adults, children and unborn babies. And it can be really hard for women, men to feel connected to their little ones, to have that emotional headspace for their little ones, to feel as though they can build those relationships if they are living in an abusive situation. They might not be allowed to show emotion to their children, for instance. Isolation and lack of social support. So we know that being isolated can tremendously have an impact on your mental health. Not having other people around you, not having that social support circle, not having somebody that you can ring up and ask for some help when you're having a particularly challenging day, that can really get in the way of feeling happy and relaxed and enjoying the time with your baby. We know that having financial, housing, unemployment, other social determinants of health affecting your day-to-day stress levels, all of those things, again, are going to get in the way. They're going to probably cause more stress within the household, cause dad to feel more stressed, and in turn make the baby feel more stressed. What then begins to happen is we get extremely anxious babies, and we get all of that being brought out in their behaviours, and often that can be a blocker and a challenge for parents to overcome, and the cycle repeats. Unplanned pregnancy or late presentation of a pregnancy. If a baby is unplanned or not necessarily or for instance not planned for or wanted, for instance, how will that parent begin to connect with that baby while they're growing inside them? Because we know that relationships start at that point. So it can be really hard for parents and women to accept the children that are growing, and then to be able to build those relationships once they are born. And then an unsettled or crying baby, or behaviour difficulties in the older child. That's one that we see a lot of, and I will talk a little in more detail about that next. And having unwell, premature, or babies with additional needs. Again, those children often cause a lot more challenge and difficulty and stress and worry and anxiety. And often a lot of those children, what we do see is that parents haven't had that time to bond, haven't had that time to be that nurturing caregiver. Say, for instance, if a child's been on the neonatal unit, often parents report that they feel more like a visitor than actually their parent, and able to take hold and control of the cares. We also know that a lot of children who do present as having possible autistic traits, often their behaviours and their behaviour cues can be mismatched, and often those children can miscue, and that can be really confusing for the parent to know and to remain in sync with them. And equally, we do see that a lot of parents that are feeling mismatched and out of sync with their children often start feeling as though there may be something kind of developmentally wrong with their children as well. So, adverse childhood experiences. So, while our brains are shaped by experiences throughout our life, experiences in early childhood play a crucial role in preparing our brains for the future. Because of the brain's unique plasticity in early childhood, positive and negative experiences can deeply impact brain development, and indeed the brain cells. Positive experiences can promote healthy brain development in a young child, while negative experiences might promote unhealthy brain development as the brain adapts to protect itself from the negative experiences that it's having. Babies need sensitive, responsive parenting, and when parents haven't experienced this themselves or had anyone who could offer this for them outside of the family home, this can often lead to extreme difficulties empathizing with or attuning to other emotions. Like I said earlier, we can't be what we can't see. So often our parents that have had adverse experiences when they've been growing up really struggle to be that role model. They really struggle to emulate a healthy relationship because they've never experienced a healthy relationship themselves. And this can lead to the cycle of intergenerational trauma to repeat. One study showed that a mother who experienced stress in pregnancy due to domestic abuse, for example, they were more likely to have babies they were likely to have babies that were twice as likely to have mental health problems as teenagers. So we really see that impact. That's not necessarily just the genetic, but also the nurture as well. Babies need predictable responses from their parents, as this will make them feel safe, understood, and heard, and very secure. Serve and return interactions. Those are those interactions where baby may smile, or mum might smile at baby and baby's face will light up. Mum will receive that interaction from baby and they'll respond back. Think of it like a tennis match with a ball going back and forth over the net. Serve and return are one of the most important things that parents can do for their baby's brain. What it does is sparks enjoyment, and it sparks a desire for wanting more. It makes the baby's brain release dopamine. Now, dopamine is one of the feel-good hormones, and this release of dopamine really shunts up the amount of glucose that the developing brain is available to the developing brain. This glucose, this sugar, will go straight to the prefrontal cortex. Now, this is the region of the brain that is concerned with executive function, things like empathy, things like rationalizing and reasoning. And really what this is basically happening is that the parents are really helping their baby's brain grow in a really positive way. If we're thinking that 1 million brain connections have been made every second, this massive influx of glucose and dopamine basically means that parents are helping their baby's brain to build in a really healthy way. This is a period of great opportunity for babies, but it's also a period of massive vulnerability as well. We know across Wakefield that we've got an estimated number that out of the 4,800 births that we receive every year on average, we know that 2,400 babies are likely to leave hospital each year to live in emotional, neglectful, stressful, often physically harmful environments where fear and unremitting stress are the norm. Out of those 4,200, about 20% are likely to experience and develop disorganized attachment. Now, this is one of the most difficult attachment presentations to work with. Often this causes children to completely be disconnected from their caregiver and not feel the emotional responsiveness from anybody around them. often over a prolonged period of time, that will really impact the way that that baby, child, teen, adult relates to other people and forms relationships with other people as well. Without any form of buffer to this stress, really what we do tend to see is that we see babies in this constant fight, flight, freeze response, this hypervigilance. This will be these babies that you see that almost like watchful wait, kind of watchful wakefulness. So they'll kind of look frozen. They'll be basically on high alert all the time. When the brain is under the fight and flight response, what really happens within it is that all of the blood and all the vital nutrients are being shunted to the central brain. This is the animal brain. This is that brain that if we're in the jungle and a tiger starts chasing us, we run. This is the area of the brain that we want the full amount of blood to in this moment. What we don't need in that moment is for us to be thinking about the higher functioning. So we don't need to be rationalizing and thinking, you know, what might the tiger be feeling like? What we need is to get away and make ourselves feel safe. And if we think about babies that are in stressful environments, that's what their brain is experiencing 100% of the time. So that is why we worry so much about these babies. For them to any harm that's going to come to them, but also the impact that it's having on their brain development and ability to relate to others. Hypervigilant babies often cry very little. Their interactions with the outside world and with their caregivers are highly likely to be too little. By that, I mean that they will be quiet, calm, restful, watching, on high alert, ready to fly. Often what this does cause is feeding, crying difficulties, and sometimes developmental delay. Often a hypervigilant baby will cry when they're touched because of the shock and the impact that has on their physiology. Parent and infant problems and issues can often present as something else. Often we get referrals into the PARE team for things like feeding difficulties, unsettled babies, or sleep difficulties. When we actually go and visit the families and we ask them about the difficulties that they're having, they start talking around settling baby and the difficulties that they have with not getting any sleep. But then often what we do find is that this kind of discloses a very bigger issue underlying. It's a little bit like, you know, you imagining one thing, you pick a bit of a scab, and then it all opens up underneath. Often when we go out to visit families, when we sit and listen and allow them that time to reflect, they start sharing things, and we find mental health difficulties that they've never disclosed to anybody else. So often we don't know what we're gonna find. We do often see parents and babies presenting with what may be like a feeding difficulty, but actually this feeding difficulty might be something that's not responded to typical over-the-counter medications, changes in milk, simple things that we can do in terms of comfort strategies. And actually, when we look at things and watch and observe, we see that actually it's possibly could be a parent-infant issue around kind of reading cues and responsiveness and that contingency, that kind of responsiveness to what the baby needs in that moment. And then what we do sometimes see is that parents will often, when children are that a little bit older, we often see children really struggling to manage and maintain and realign themselves after having an emotional kind of tantrum. Often parents will see that as being a child being naughty. Actually, what we do a lot of work of in PARE is allowing parents to, helping parents to understand what it means to be mind-minded, helping parents see that actually behaviour is an expression of an emotion, and trying to kind of bring their mindset round a little bit more. Often what we do see is that children are presenting under 2 with quite typical behaviours for a child of that age, but actually parents are struggling to relate, they're struggling to see and relate to them emotionally, so they're kind of seeing it as a kind of a physiological problem, developmental problem, rather than something that actually is quite a normal response for a child of that age. So, parental mental health. What evidence tells us is that parental mental health perinatal mental health issues are one of the leading causes of difficulties forming a connection with baby, but also that mental health and suicide is consistently the third highest cause of maternal death in the perinatal period. What we know is that at least 1 in 5 women experience a perinatal mental health problem, making it the most common serious mental health problem that a woman will experience in this period of time. Suicide is still the leading cause of death for a woman when looking across the perinatal period. What we know is that there is a higher incidence of mortality rates for women from Black backgrounds, and 1.8 times higher for Asian women over and above their white counterparts. We really all need to be thinking about perinatal mental health. And I suppose if we see a parent who is really struggling with their mental health, we're worried about any red flags, such as a woman presenting with bizarre, worrying changes to her mental health or personality, then we really need to be thinking about getting some urgent mental health support for that woman via 999 or the perinatal mental health team. What we need to be thinking about is that postpartum psychosis is something that does happen. It does happen throughout our community in our district. And if we do see a woman who is really struggling with her mental health, we need to treat it as a mental health emergency, and we need to be getting that emergent support. What we do know around women with postpartum psychosis is that they can have periods of lucidity, but also run the risk of their mental health deteriorating rapidly as well, with disastrous and often fatal consequences for mum and baby. Postpartum psychosis has got the biggest suicide rate and also the infanticide rate. Often when women do try to end their lives with a postpartum psychosis, they will try to end their children's lives as well. So it's something that we really need to be aware of. We know that perinatal mental health problems go hand in hand with parent and infant problems. It's just something to be really mindful of as practitioners out there. What we would be saying is, if you can, get that woman to a GP or ring 999. Be classing it as a mental health red flag. Again, if a mum has any disclosures of feeling incompetent as a mother, or that she feels estranged from her baby, then that again should be categorised as a mental health red flag, and we should be dealing with it in an emergency situation. Perinatal mental health team, if you come across any parents that we do know has got a serious mental health problem and they're thinking of getting pregnant, you can make a referral into the perinatal team at that point. What they will do is they will take women for preconception counselling. So if she's on mental health medication that we're unsure around the safety for pregnancy, they will take an assessment at that point. They will also do work with that mum as well at that point if her needs dictate it, around the parent-infant relationship and bonding and attachment. So kind of the perinatal team can offer that as well for women that are really struggling with their mental health. We know that depression is one of the most major complications in maternity, and it's not inevitable, but it massively increases the risk of a child to go on to have depression from the ages of around 16 years. ACEs increases the risk of depression in the perinatal period also, and it will also increase the risk of a parent and infant relationship problem. We know that generalized anxiety disorder in pregnancy doubles the risk of the childhood of the child or the baby having anxiety, emotional and behavioural problems as they grow up. Often what we find, highly anxious parents cause highly anxious children to grow, and often that can cause that parental mismatch and for them to really struggle to connect and read cues. Often these will be the parents that you will receive multiple telephone calls from. They'll be the ones that will be ringing into the SPOC or attending GP, attending A&E on a repeated cycle. Again, there is mental health support out there to help with that parent-infant relationship problem. And I'd always be saying that if you have got a parent who's really struggling with their mental health, to really be considering what impact is that going to have on the relationship that they're forming with their children. And if so, come to us in pair for a consultation, and it may well be appropriate for a referral. We know as well that mental health disorders don't just come under generalised anxiety and depression. We see parents with panic disorder, with phobias, with OCD, with post-traumatic stress disorder and complex post-traumatic stress disorder. A complex PTSD presentation is highly likely to have been an adult who has had an adverse childhood extreme trauma. You may see other kind of historic referrals to it being an emotionally unstable personality disorder, a borderline personality disorder. Really, we need to be thinking in a more of a trauma-informed way rather than thinking what's wrong with the parent. Let's think about what's happened to the parent and let's move forward from there. We also know that eating disorders such as bulimia and anorexia can massively impact the parent-infant relationship. And I would definitely be saying that if you've got a parent who is presenting with an eating disorder, please consider the impact that that could be having then on the child and getting the most appropriate support for them. We know that depressed parents will find it really hard to connect. They often feel really worthless. They feel as though they are a failure, and they find it really hard to be consistent with any kind of care interaction that they can provide to their babies. Again, what we tend to find is that we've got anxious parents. We will often find that anxious parents may be presenting with a very high crying baby, a baby with a feeding problem, and often a parent that struggles to soothe and console their babies as well. And again, that can often come through our team for support. Feeding difficulties. Whether a baby's breastfed or bottle fed, what we always promote is that that baby is fed in response to its hunger cues or response to its behaviour cues. Most parents, they expect that a newborn baby will be kind of like bizarre in its routine and there'll be no pattern. But most parents expect for that to settle. What we do know is that babies don't like routine. Babies like to have their needs met in response to what they feel and experience within their bodies. Often when this doesn't happen for parents, they can often feel as though it's something that they're doing wrong, that there's something wrong with their babies, and straight away will feel as though they need some kind of specialist support. So this is what we're talking about when we see parents returning repeatedly to GPs, A&E, ringing the single point of contact number around their baby's been windy, their baby's been colicky, their baby's being having difficulties kind of like taking a feed. What we do need to do, and what we would always say, is make sure that we're ruling out any actual physiological problem for this. But what we do talk to parents about, and what we talk to GPs about as well, is the fact that if normal things aren't helping, what else might possibly be going on? And often what we do support women with and parents with in pair is really responding and watching and picking up on simple cues like those disengagement cues and those engagement cues when babies have too much or they need a bit of a break or a change of pace, because often that can massively impact how well a baby will take a feed as well. Breastfeeding as well brings with it a lot of parental anxiety. We've got a wonderful infant feeding team. We've got the FAB team in the community. We've also got our 0 to 19 infant feeding team as well. But what we do know is that breastfed babies, often getting established at the breast, can often be quite challenging for parents. A lot of parents will feel really stressed. They'll be in pain. They'll be probably be experiencing sleep deprivation. And when a baby is really struggling possibly to gain weight or latch to the breast, this often brings about feelings of incompetency as a mum, failure, low mood. Often women who've really wanted to breastfeed but haven't been able to breastfeed will feel rejected by their babies or that there's something wrong with them. And that is a lot of some of the support that we offer during pair as well. I would say that if parents are feeling like that, that is going to have a massive impact into that parent-infant relationship as well. And to always be thinking pair if you've supporting any families or seeing any families that are having recurrent feeding difficulties. A crying baby. We know that having a crying baby or a baby that's really difficult to settle and soothe can have massive impact into how you feel about that baby and the relationships that you form and how much you feel as though that baby has kind of like taken over your life and is really intruding into your life as well. Across the board, we all give the ICON approach. So the ICON approach is that infant crying is really normal. We ask parents to think about the comfort strategies for baby, but also to think about strategies to calm themselves down. If things aren't improving, what we do say is that it is absolutely okay to walk away. Take a break for a minute, make sure baby's safe, walk away. It is much better to walk away, take a minute, let that baby cry for a few seconds, and then reapproach baby, because we always give that message that it's never okay to shake a baby. And those are the same messages that yourselves will be giving out, that GPs will give out as well, and across the board health visiting team gives out. We know that naturally there is a peak of crying around 6 to 8 weeks, and kind of warning parents about that is really important. You know, giving parents truthful information often is much better to kind of like equip them with what they might need as that time approaches for that baby as well. Kind of acknowledging and validating that actually it is really hard. Yeah, it's really normal, but it is still really, really hard as well. And allowing parents time to express how they're feeling. What we do know is that babies are often born with a temperament. We can often see that there's 3 types of baby. Easy babies are quite easygoing. They'll develop typical feeding patterns and kind of slot into life without too much of a difficulty. We often see babies that are quite kind of feisty. The emotion tend to be quite emotional, quite irritable, fussy, cry a lot, and often just respond in a way that they would kind of on their own terms, as it were. Often kind of feisty babies are difficult to soothe. And then we've got babies that are often slower to warm up. They might have a lower level of activity. They might need a little bit more encouragement for that face-to-face, or their expressions might be a little more muted. What we do know is that problems start building up if the parent is mismatched to the child's temperament. So if we've got a parent who is quite anxious and we've got quite a feisty baby, that can often cause them to clash. Equally, if we've got a parent that is kind of a little bit unsure about themselves, low in confidence, or that they're feeling a little bit low and depressed, and we've got a baby that's a little slower to warm up, that needs a little bit more encouragement, often that can be a bit of a mismatch as well. And in pair, we will help parents to reconnect, to kind of like repair those ruptures and learn about each other by using ready to relate techniques and talking around typical baby norms and dispelling a lot of age-old parenting myths as well. We know that a crying baby and an anxious often will have a very anxious parent, and we know that birth trauma can often bring about feelings of resentment for the baby as well. We know that parental ACEs and having a baby that cries can often stoke a lot of the difficult experiences that parents have had in their childhoods. We call it kind of like the ghosts in the nursery. So listening to their babies cry can often bring about feelings of stress and anxiety, and almost like a post-traumatic stress response in a parent that may have been left to cry when they were small, even when it was an experience possibly that they don't actually physically recall. We know that those experiences are hardwired into our brain, so they can still bring about periods of extreme difficulty for parents as well. We also really need to be thinking about the wider determinants of health. What else is impacting in this family to cause a stressful environment and possibly a more sensitive baby? If parents are stressed, we know that babies will pick up on that stress. They'll pick up on the cortisol levels. What that does is dampens down their oxytocin hormone levels, and it causes them to cry even more. Being held by a parent that's feeling stressed themselves, straight away babies will pick up on those cues and feel even more stressed, and that crying will continue. So again, it's talking about soothing coping strategies, around soothing strategies, around that contingency approach in terms of ICON, and getting that parent a little bit more support, whether that's via the pair team, whether it's around looking at what support they've got locally in their community, whether it's during the family hubs, whether it is within their family and friendship networks, or if it's referring into the pair team for some kind of family peer support, some normalizing. What we know is that failure, guilt, and that they're not normal parents, all of those things come about in parents that are feeling really unsettled and like they're not building connections with their babies. So what we do know is that often in these situations, parents will look at trying to blame, and we often find that in older children, when parents are feeling quite disconnected with their little ones, they will almost like pathologize it as being maybe a sleep problem, a crying problem, and then can we just make sure we're all on mute, please? Thank you. Thanks. So they'll kind of pathologize things as being more of a sleep problem, a crying problem, a behavior problem. Actually, often what those parents need is just a little bit more time to explore what their worries and stresses are. So in terms of making a referral for us, so there's lots of different ways that you can do that. Hopefully you should all have a copy of our referral form. The little screenshot that you can see on there, that is for the Ardens template for the community and the mental health team and the GPs. So if you are ringing from primary care, that is where you would find on system 1 in your Ardens referral systems, that's where you would find the pair referral. So as yourself as professionals, you would complete a pair referral form, and you can, prior to that, you can contact myself or Jane for a consultation. You do that by ringing our single point of contact number, which is 0300 373 0944. We can have a chat with you. We can email you a copy of the referral form if you don't already have one. If you have, and you feel confident that you've got all the bits and bobs that you need, bob us an email in. We will look and triage at those. We will look at those referrals every single week, and we will keep you updated as a referrer as well. If for any reason we didn't feel it fell out of our criteria, we wouldn't just leave you high and dry. We'd give you a call and we'd discuss what else might be useful for this family. Our team has a weekly meeting, a referrals meeting. We look at new referrals in that meeting, and we also look at referrals that have come in that we've done an initial assessment for. And as an MDT, we look at the best form of a care plan to get that real wraparound care for that family. At the minute, we only have 2 people on our waiting list. So we're doing work with families. We're very, very busy, but we've only got 2 waiting on our waiting list. So we're in quite a good position at the minute for referrals, if there's anybody that you do want to refer in. And once the kind of intervention is complete, once we've done our work with Impair, what we will do is we will update you as the referrer. And if we did feel as though there was anything more that we needed to do at that point, then we would come back and we'd do additional referrals on. If at any point that we're working with a family that you want an update, that you haven't heard from us, please reach out and contact us again via the single point or via the pair inbox, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. So, any questions? Any questions, anybody? It's absolutely fine if there isn't. No? Okay, so thank you for your time today. Hopefully it's been useful. We are doing another lunchtime learning session for December as well. That one will be around the actual assessment of parent-infant, what we go through and what we look at, and some of the other stuff that we assess for as well. If you've got any questions or queries, please drop them into the chat. Equally, email me or give me a call at single point. But thank you for today. This session will be recorded and it'll be on the Wakefield Safeguarding Children's Board website. And if you just search PAIR, you'll find all the recordings. What I'll also do is just send out a little evaluation form. What we're trying to do is make these sessions as user-friendly and interesting as possible. So any feedback is really, really welcome. And thank you all for your time today.
Thanks, Sally.
No worries. Thank you.